Ladies and gentlemen, we'll call this meeting of the Planning Commission of the Town of Hilton Head Island to order. We start off our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. Karen, can I ask if we are in compliance with the Freedom of Information Act?
Yes, sir, we are.
We are? Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Karen, may I ask you to call the roll?
Certainly. Mr. D'Arienzo? Here. Mr. Siebold?
Here.
Mr. Hens?
Here.
Mr. Campbell?
Here.
Mr. O'Neill?
Here.
And Mr. Scanlon?
Here.
Thank you.
Does staff have any changes to the agenda before us?
No, sir.
No changes? Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the agenda before the commission? Mr. Hens moves it as a second. Mr. Siebold, all in favor, please raise your right hand. Unanimous vote on that. Approval of minutes. May I have a motion to approve the February 15th minutes that are in your kit?
Okay.
Mr. Ty Scott, is Mr. Ty Scott here? Ty, you welcome to the podium.
Hello, everybody.
Okay, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Yes, Tyrone Scott for the record. In regards to the proposed LMO changes, one would have to question why would the town be considering any changes to the LMO which would directly affect the Gullah communities without having first implemented the neighborhood district plans. After countless efforts to resolve outstanding historical Gullah Native concerns, why are we rushing through LMO amendments which could negatively impact the historic Gullah neighborhoods before implementing the district plans? The town stressed and decided that an overlay would be a difficult task and district plans such as the Mid-Island Plan would be best for planning the Gullah communities. Are we putting the cart before the horse? Not only has the Planning Commission, the Gullah Geechee Task Force, and the Town Council approved implementation of the task force recommendations, but Town Councils had them remain in their list of priorities. There should not be any proposed LMO amendments implemented prior to the incorporation of district plans. How will the proposed LMO amendments impact the district plan? We don't know. Why implement regulations that could counter the effects of the district plan? A prime example of not truly researching the impacts of amendments can be easily seen in the approved family subdivision and family compounds. Staff are still having difficulties with how these approved plans impact Gullah natives. If the town is truly dedicated to fulfilling their obligations regarding the Gullah community initiatives, then no LMO amendments should move forward. Slow down. Stop piecemealing ordinances, and let's do it right. History continues to show that rushing through amendments to appease certain groups of people has always had a negative effect on the Gullah natives. Absolutely no LMO amendment which devalues, restricts currently permitted uses, places more restrictions such as greater buffer requirements, which would impact the further use of Gullah-owned land, should be considered without first having the district plan implemented. Develop a comprehensive plan. If the town wants us to trust them and the process, then actions such as these rushed amendments should not be considered. After many years of Gullah Task Force commitment to the betterment of our Gullah Native community, rushing and disregarding the Gullah betterment, and disregarding the Gullah community's efforts is historically more of the same. Let's give and show the Gullah Native community the respect that we surely deserve.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Appreciate it. I'm going to call on, is it Mr. Radu Chindris? Are you in the audience?
Yes, I am.
Did I say that right?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Hello, everyone. My name is Radu Chindris. It happened that I own property in RD. And looking at the proposed changes, I can see that seriously affects the building envelope of the property. And I'm just one single owner. I don't know how many other people are out there. There are seriously going to be affected by these changes. It reduces building envelope. It basically reduces density. It goes back to a very simple thing. You have a less envelope. You redefine multifamily from single family home, duplex. You take the duplex out of the single family home definition. You basically restricting density. You're basically cutting density in two. Just simple math. So I'm speaking against it. I think if the community wants to evaluate this, it has to be done in a proper way, as Mr. Scott very well said it. This is a rush decision that significantly will impact every single owner out there. If a reduction in density is needed, then let's look at rezoning and do it the proper way. I mean, I personally didn't even know about the changes until I looked in the town agenda. I mean, people do not know how those changes are made and exactly how it's going to affect their property. I mean, I'm an active person. I work 8 hours a day. I have kids to raise. I have work to do. I can't keep up with very, very minor changes that have a very, very serious implication in the way our property rights are affected. So I speak totally against it. I'm totally against it. It's a rush decision, and it's not done in the best interest of the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chindress. I'll go back to Mr. Braden. Mr. Braden, are you in the room? He had signed up to speak, but he's not here. So we will move on. Are there any other? We have received portal comments, have we not, Karen?
Yes, sir, we did. And I emailed the portal comments to the commissioners, and they will be made part of the official record.
All right, I had a chance to read those, and I'm sure the other gentlemen up here have as well. All right, let's see. We have no unfinished business before us today. And the new business is we're having a public hearing on these LMO amendments. The town of Hilton Head Island is proposing to amend chapters 4 and 10 of the Land Management Ordinance, LMO, to revise the following sections. Section 16-4-103.d.2 and 16-4-103.e.2 and 16-10-105 to eliminate the allowance of divisible dwelling units, and section 1610-103A2 to modify multifamily and single-family definitions. We have presenting from the staff, Missy Lewick. Are you ready? Okay. Missy Lewick is our Assistant Community Development Director.
I just wanted to make sure, I just got a text from Mac DeFord, our General Counsel, who said he wasn't able to hear us. Mac, can you hear the meeting now?
I can hear you, and then, but I cannot hear the Planning Commission members. I'm watching on YouTube as well, but there's a delay, so I cannot hear in real time from the Planning Commission members.
Can you fix that real quick?
All right. Technical break. Oh, okay. All right, fair enough.
I think I'd have to leave the Teams in order to get it back into it. That should help. Okay, can you hear us a little bit better now?
I can hear whoever's at the podium.
Okay, perfect. Let's try it.
Okay. Members of the commission, I would entertain a motion to open up a public hearing on this LMO amendments. Do I have such a motion on one of the commissioners? So moved. Mr. Siebold, is there a second? Mr. D'Lorenzo is seconding. And all in favor of opening up public hearing on these LMO amendments, raise your hand. It's a unanimous vote.
Missy Lewick, Assistant Community Development Director for the record. Thank you for having me. So this LMO amendment set is relatively straightforward as far as the definition changes go. And I wanted to also address some of the comments from the public, but it is to change the single-family definition and multifamily. Our definition for single-family included 2 or less homes on a lot, and then multifamily was greater than 2. And this simply changes the single-family definition more in line with how single-family is defined in other zoning codes across the country, which is 1 unit on a parcel, and that multifamily is 2 or more. So that was the intent of the definition change. And then the second change that's included in the proposed amendment that's before you is to eliminate divisible dwelling units, which are commonly referred to as lockout units. And that is, there will be other, there are lockout units on the island. Those would become legal non-conforming uses, but this change would not allow any future lockout units or divisible dwelling units to be approved. And then in regard to some of the comments that were made, the change doesn't disallow any density that is previously assigned. It's just how, whether the use in how we apply that in the tables that we have, how we apply setbacks and buffers, whether it's single family or multifamily, would change a little bit. But it does not change the number of dwelling units that can be placed on a property.
Okay. Discussion, I'll start with Mr. D'Lorenzo. Do you have any comments or questions?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Missy. Can you further explain what is driving these amendments? Is it to become similar to other communities, or is there something that requires this kind of an amendment and redefinition?
Sure. Well, we were looking at our definitions, and we wanted to bring both single-family and multifamily more in line with how they're traditionally defined in other areas. And then as far as the use as it relates to divisible dwelling units, the community and staff feels like that's not an appropriate use to continue, and so that's why we wanted to remove that use going forward.
And so any lockout units that exist will remain.
Yep.
And moving forward, new construction will abide by the new rules.
Right. That's correct.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Siebold.
I'm wondering, both of the people we've heard from through the portal reference the concept of mother-in-law suites in a single-family dwelling. Would this ordinance change have anything to, would it limit or disallow anything like that?
Mother-in-law suite. I did not receive the portal comments, so I'm not familiar with that. They were talking about mother-in-law suites.
Somebody who
like-
anticipates having a relative move in and they want kind of semi-separate quarters in their own home for them, would this disqualify that from taking place?
Would be the
don't know.
definition of a lockout. Maybe we could do it that way.
I would have to look into that. I can't answer that right now.
All right, any other questions, sir?
thank you,
Mr. Hens?
Yeah, the new definitions seem pretty logical, multifamily versus single.
All right. Mr. Campbell, anything?
Yeah, will this affect the overlay district at any point?
Are you talking about the one for the historic neighborhood, Gullah-Geechee overlay? Again, this doesn't impact, density overall. It's just a change in the definition. Right now, it's just how we would define what development is being proposed, and then right now, it's how we would apply the development standards, i.e. like setbacks and buffers based on, is it a single-family development or is it multifamily? So no.
Mr. O'Neill?
Yeah, just a couple of questions here.
Sure.
It might be that I don't understand some of this, but first of all, to the initial comments from the Gullah community, staff feel like that we've addressed those concerns? You know, the need for a district-wide plan first, the understanding of who's impacted by this in that community, the question of what's the rush here, because I'm having trouble understanding how you're going to go forward with one set of rules and grandfather everybody with the old set of rules. Mm-hmm. And over time, how are we really going to manage that? I'm really not understanding that. And I support, I need to understand.
Right.
Help?
Commissioner O'Neill, could you please unmute your microphone? Everyone that's speaking, make sure that you have the red light.
It's gone.
Yeah, you're on now.
Do I need to start over? Okay, the question is, the first comments from the Gullah community, I think, are good questions. What's the rush? Why not wait for a district plan first and understand better than I do anyway the impact of a set of rules for people that have already bought and built from in-law apartments to setbacks and buffers that are also going to be affected by all of this, and how are we going to manage those two different situations going forward?
Sure. So really this change applies to, and what would become non-conforming are parcels that have 2 units on one lot currently that are now considered to be single family. Then now with this definition change, 2 homes on one lot are now going to be considered multifamily. So that's what could become non-conforming if the setbacks and buffers would change. Sometimes, depending on what the adjacent use is, the setbacks and buffers are the same, whether it's 1 or 2 homes. So it all depends on because we have adjacent use setback and buffers. That's how we apply it with what the use is adjacent to the development. So it's a little bit nuanced, but that is what this change could affect and make non-conforming. Again, are the sites that have currently 2 homes on one lot that are considered single family. The development doesn't change. It's just that they would be considered a legal non-conforming, with 2 single family homes on one lot. But really what would happen is that they would just be considered, instead of single family use, they would now be considered multifamily use. But the development of 2 homes stays the same. As far as your question about timing, we had outlined to the Public Planning Committee a multi-phased LMO amendment phasing plan. This amendment is phase 3 in that plan. Phase 4 that's coming next has a range of LMO amendments that will really complement some of what's started here in phase 3, but really looking at a lot of the development standards section, some of our administrative section, some definitions will be looked at as well in that phase 4. So this is just a little bit ahead of that phase 4 set, but it is in line with what we're doing as far as our LMO amendment overhaul and really looking at changes based on the LMO SWOT analysis that we had done in January. Did I answer all of your questions?
Thank you. I guess then, can you tell me a little bit about how many people would be affected? How many existing structures would now be classified differently than they are now?
I don't have that answer for you today. It's something that the team is looking into. Mm-hmm. And it's a little bit of a nuanced search just because of our adjacent use requirements, mm-hmm. But we're looking into that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, so Missy, again, I'm somewhat concerned about the source of the changes. Why is this moving at this point in the calendar year, for example? Why are we doing this now, and are we in some hurry?
Well, we have received numerous community, concerns that have been raised about a number of sections in the code, which is why we've executed both the SWOT analysis and this 5-phased LMO amendment plan, and this just happens to be a little bit in front of the Phase 4 set. So it's part of the larger plan.
All right, so if we recommend this to town council as written, basically we're grandfathering in all current lockouts, is correct? We're grandfathering them in
Yep.
for the future. But they are non-conforming, is that right?
They would be considered legal non-conforming uses, yes.
All right. What if we put a certain date on this? We have, people may have plans to build lockouts. For example, how would this affect the Folly Field issue? I mean, they're planning to build lockouts as part of that development that they're proposing. Would this ban them from doing lockouts?
This would, is Sean in here? Did he leave?
Ashley Goodrich, Principal Planner.
Yes, Ashley. If you could step up to the mic, I'd appreciate it. We can hear you.
So one aspect of nonconformities in terms of a legal nonconforming and the both to the use and the structure is that the applicability for any new development or redevelopment would be that a new development would need to be in conformance to the code to the maximum extent feasible. And at the time of the application for the development, the rule of the code of law would stand. So part of when something becomes a non-conforming use, it is allowed to remain and exist unless at which at some time it comes forward as redevelopment. And when something is coming forward as a redevelopment, then the new aspect of the code, if it's non-conforming, the goal is to bring it into conforming compliance.
Now, if we were to move this up to town council and town council were to approve the LMO amendments as they're written before us, would the date of the proposal for Folly Field, how would that affect that particular project? In other words, would we be banning lockouts once town council acts? That project could not go forward with lockouts. Is that the case?
So as in any other aspect of our LMO code of any other chapter, the difference with Folly Field, because I don't know exactly if it's a full application, if it's currently under review for that one topic.
Yeah, right, that's what I don't understand.
As an active application, our code states that they would be applicable to where they were when they applied, if their application is complete.
Okay, so they could have lockouts then as part of their plan.
That being said, every other aspect of our review in the development process is to work through from where the code will be, and that is with any application from the moment they are fully entered in and applied.
Missy, or maybe Ashley, what you can answer this. What is the effect on a family compound by this LMO changes? What would be the effect?
Family compound development is considered to be single family no matter the number of units on the family compound, so there's no effect.
No effect?
No effect.
Okay. Yeah, I just don't, if you're going to do a lockout, you don't want to lock out your mother-in-law. That you could hear about that after a while. Let's see, is there anything else? I don't see the source or the reason for the speed at which we're going on this. I don't want to hold up something at the town council level if they are interested in moving this thing along quickly. But I think there's some questions that are not answered here, and we need to get them answered. In terms of the district plans and other things, any comment or any thoughts that enlighten us on that?
So one thing to think about as we clarify the code today, and even in these small pieces, as first with looking at the LMO SWOT that was previously done with our staff and review, is that clarifying single-family versus multifamily in a very clear and concise way is, as we work through our district planning, we are able to then, therefore, as we create our districts, have a very clear and concise definition to lead us in the guidance for these district plans. One of the things that when we look at what makes a single-family home in terms of the values of our community and our island character, and those of us who are all here today in our advocacy and interest, as well as our home ownership, our property, is that that having single family be relatively strictly one unit makes it clear for the applicability of us to implement our code and all of our, both our districts and then our zoning and other pieces.
I'm trying to determine if we ban lockouts, does that ban persons from putting in their single-family home a mother-in-law unit?
Yes.
The biggest thing to think about a lockout unit versus a mother-in-law suite, and this is...
Is it rented separately? That's the reason it's a lockout?
It's not even so much about it being rented separately as the number of utilities that can be therefore added into the specific build out in the structure. To break down sort of how someone can add a mother-in-law suite or have extra rooms in their property, the difference then becomes, and the real strict difference to saying what is one unit versus two units and things like that, is if, let's say you had two utility boxes or two water lines, you have duplicate sets of infrastructure connecting into your property. So the clarification of one versus multiple is also to help clarify that as well.
I don't know if we're clarifying anything. Sean, do you have anything to add?
I'm sorry I had to step out during
Oh,
some of
sorry.
the discussion. So the determination on more than one dwelling unit on a site, it has to meet all 5 requirements for a dwelling unit, okay? The lockout units are divisible dwelling units.
Right.
Have been primarily linked with timeshare or other resort uses.
Right.
So as it relates to mother-in-law suites or frogs, finished room over garage, if it doesn't meet the definition of another dwelling unit, so if it doesn't have eating, sleeping, cooking, sanitation, and living, did I get all that? Is that right? Then it doesn't meet the definition of a dwelling. And so therefore, depends on the mother-in-law suite. If it's fully articulated with a full kitchen, or a kitchen and a bathroom and a bedroom and a eating and sleeping facility, then it's a full unit.
Separate road
It's not a
first.
divisible dwelling unit, which under our code are half of a unit.
How can we, is there some language we can put in here that would differentiate between a lockout and adding a mother-in-law suite to a current single-family home?
Well, what I would say is, I think what the language before you today is related to the lockouts, right?
Right.
And it doesn't change the ability of a mother-in-law suite or finished room over garage, because those aren't classified as lockouts per our definition through divisible dwelling unit. So I'd like to handle the lockout item that's before you, and then as we come forward with this LMO
Yeah,
overhaul.
it's a matter of definition. I
Yeah.
just want to make sure that
Yes,
a
sir.
mother-in-law suite is not in the
Correct.
definition of a lockout.
Yeah, and so I think as we move forward with the full overhaul of the code that we're currently in phase 3, this is phase 3, we have a phase 4 and a 5, but between now and the end of the year to overhaul the whole code, we'll make sure that that clarification is provided. And there have been other questions about accessory dwelling units.
Yeah.
So we get into, hey, maybe as part of a workforce solution is to have accessory dwelling units that you could then provide accommodations for workforce. it's a program that's used in a lot of communities. Some communities mandate it. And so I'm not promoting one way or the other, whether or not that's where we land, but that would be part of that deeper policy discussion for end of year. Yes,
All right,
sir.
so today we're discussing lockouts.
Yes, sir.
In this amendment, okay.
Yes, sir.
So if we were to vote for it, we are eliminating future lockouts.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
All right. Well, thank you, Sean. Any other questions going around one more time? Tom?
Yeah, if single family doesn't mean single family and multifamily doesn't mean multifamily, I don't see how you could ever plan. I mean, it's just basic.
Rick, anything additional?
There was another written comment, written public comment that caught some language that she wanted to clarify that the divisible dwelling units are strictly in the CR and the RD districts and not in the RSF district. You recall seeing that particular comment?
Yes.
So I thought that was a pretty good comment that in terms of grandfathering these new divisible lockout units, it was her opinion that it should be applicable in the CR and the RD, but not the RSF.
And again, I think as we do the district planning, finish the district
Yeah.
planning, if we identify within that district planning, the districts and then the zoning classifications within the districts, if certain use types are
Yeah.
appropriate, then they should be included. If they are not appropriate, then they will be excluded. And that part will be cleaned up as we move forward. I don't make a policy decision because we haven't had the discussion on it, but I don't disagree with the premise of making sure that you promote resort-style uses in areas that are resort and not necessarily what we would say traditional single-family or community neighborhoods. So that should be part of the next steps that we're taking with district planning, the island-wide master plan, and the overhaul to the code. Yes, sir.
Can we get some kind of a general feeling for how this change from single family to multifamily affects the buffer and the setbacks? I know Missy mentioned there's some adjacency issues, but can we put it in some kind of a general perspective?
I think Missy can answer some of it, but when you have multifamily next to single family, the buffer requirement is higher than it is between single family and single family. And so if you had an instance where you had a single family lot next to a lot that could accommodate more than one, right? So two or more now based on this change in definition, then that lot would be classified now as a multifamily lot. And so the buffer would increase, I don't know, let's say from 20 feet to 30 feet between that.
But that would be grandfathered in, so it really wouldn't affect.
Well,
an
it would be
existing
grandfathered
situation.
in on existing lots, but any new development, right, would
Right.
have to meet that standard. So yes, there would be some implications. And I fully expect that as we go again through the full code, that those performance and site development standards get calibrated so that they make sense. And if we are no longer going to allow more than one unit on a lot, in single-family zones, then that will be we'll probably look at a different setback and different buffer standard in that case than exists today. But it's tough to think it through every scenario. We just know that that's an impact that we'd have to clean up with performance standards going forward.
Mr. Campbell?
No questions at this point.
Mr. Seabold?
Yeah, I'm a little concerned about the unintended consequences of, I understand the value of changing the definition between single and multi, that makes sense. And maybe the divisible locking units to the existing units, but there's a home in my neighborhood in Port Royal, right down the street from Rick, that has for 35 years had a standalone other second home in the front yard. And I don't know if there's a kitchen in it or if it meets any of those standards, but it's a guest house for when the family comes, I'm pretty sure, but, I'm still not clear about how this would change anything like that.
Those conditions would be legal, non-conforming features of the site. And, provided you didn't have a renovation that was 49% or more of the value of the property, that would be allowed to continue.
The new rules apply
Yes,
at
sir.
that point.
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill?
I remain concerned about the impact of this and not knowing enough about the numbers of people that are impacted. And I also remain concerned. It's not that I'm not supportive of single-family definition and all of that, but going forward, we're going to have two definitions. The one we had before the date of this approval, and then forever on, the other definition. And I'm trying to figure out the balance here of people that are in one group asking about the other group, and I think we ought to be able to explain to them in more detail than, first, we don't know how many, and secondly, the idea that buffers and setbacks and all of that are kind of ill-defined until you get a project, right? So all of that still concerns me.
Yeah, and I think rightfully so. And I'll point back to, like when we adopt the new flood insurance rate maps from FEMA, their base flood changes, and then so you might have a house that was built a certain year and it's 4 feet lower than what you're required to do today, and then same thing, right? The house that was built in the previous version is legally compliant with the code at that time, but no longer compliant to the adopted standard. And so you see that every time you adopt a code, right? Unless it's in an area that doesn't have a lot of development or any development already. But any area that's got existing development is going to have slightly different, right? So you adjust a setback or buffer or parking standard, then you're going to have sites that are non-compliant based on the code that was in place at the time. They met it, and the new code. And there are provisions to bring sites, non-conforming sites, legally non-conforming sites, into compliance over time. You know what I mean? At least make them not more non-conforming. And so that's part of the process. You can't flip a switch and say everything's got to comply to the new code. It is over time. There's a migration that's a better standard. But I do understand and agree with your concern that you do create sort of disparity between one house that's across the street from another, meeting a different standard. The height change, it might have been a height change or a setback angle, let alone a use change or definition for single versus multifamily. So,
Thank you, Sean.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak on this issue? Yes, Mr. Scott, is that you again?
Yes. Yes, again, Taiwan Scott, for the record. I'm actually curious if it would be appropriate. It appears as though the mic was off when I gave my speech, and if it would be appropriate for me to reread my speech into public record. I guess the town attorney, assistant town attorney, couldn't hear, and if he couldn't hear, then I'm imagining the public didn't hear either.
Do we have that on any record? I mean,
Sir, this is Mac DeFore, General Counsel for the town. Mr. Scott, just so you're aware, I could hear anyone who was at the podium, so I heard you speak at the previous public comment. I could not hear any of the commissioners before, but now I can hear everyone.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that my speech was on record and everybody could hear.
Yes, sir, Mr. Scott, you are on record.
Okay, all right. Some issues that I still want to bring to everybody's attention. Again, we want to stress again that the district plan should be implemented prior to any changes of the LMO. And we all have to question ourselves, what would be the financial impact on the Gullah community within the RD zone if we're picking out permitted uses today? How are they going to be compensated for those uses? Because that's a value that they can do today, that we're just grabbing that out and taking it. RD, the available property that's available in the RD is currently owned by, well, the majority of it is owned by Gullah natives. So it feels as though we're kind of picking and choosing how we're going to manage their potential use in the future when it's something that's permitted today. And again, all these changes are going to result to nonconformities. The issue with buffers, it's not just property lines that's going to be affected from going between single family and multifamily. We're going to have buffers from roads. So how is that going to impact the use of the Gullah native families outside of the family compounds and family subdivisions? Are we taking that into consideration? I mean, every Gullah native family is not going to do a family compound and family subdivision. How are we going to impact these people's property? by making these decisions today without having the district plan implemented. So it appears as though there's a lot of unanswered questions, and we are truly rushing this through when we should take a step back and look at a comprehensive plan and bring forth the district plan to see how these amendments are going to truly affect the Gullah community. That's my concern. That's my concern, the Gullah community, and how we can advance in the future and continue retaining our land.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Thank you. Any other members of the public want to talk on this particular issue of the elemental amendments? Chester?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Chester Williams. I know you asked the question, Mr. Chairman, but I'm not sure Ms. Goodrich ever gave a direct answer to it, is what's the effect of this on the Folly Field Road development? I mean, my understanding has always been that an applicant plays by the rules that are in place at the time they make their application.
Right.
And I just want to make sure that's an accurate statement with respect to that development, and that getting rid of lockouts doesn't have an adverse effect on their ability to go forward with their.
Right, that was my understanding as well.
Okay. And is that it?
Is that a fair assessment?
I see Mr. Colin shaking his head yes back there in the back.
Yes, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other public comments? If not,
One more, Mike, back.
one more in the back. Okay, yes, sir.
Oh, sorry.
Radu Chindris for the record.
Yes, sir.
I think everything the way it's written, it's subject to interpretation, especially with the date of application, because the planning committee, the planning department can say if an application, for some reason, it's incomplete, if it's missing one thing out of the application, it might be a full application, but their comments, and you need to support those comments. If the application is not fully completed, they can say that it's incomplete, and therefore that the previous date of the application, I think, doesn't stand. So please clarify that, because I think it's very, very important. In addition to that, I like to speak about buffers and adjacent use. So now we're going from single-family home to multifamily. You have a significant increase of buffers. So now you have a property in RD that technically you had the right to have 2 units on it. But by the time you apply the buffers, you basically don't have a building envelope anymore. So therefore, it's a significant reduction in your density rights, in addition to not being able to do what you meant to do. And with respect to mother-in-law suite, I think that will qualify to being a multifamily if you want to have a full kitchen on it. So,
yes.
It's a building code issue, and I don't think everybody fully understands that. So I think there's a lot of questions that need to be answered, and I will recommend that the committee doesn't go forward with this, because there's pretty much all the properties that are out there. Most of the lots are 60, 70 feet. If you have 30-foot buffer on one side and 30 foot on the other side, you have an unbuildable unit. So therefore, the intent, you can only do 1 unit versus 2 units. So the fact that you have a density of 16 and RD doesn't mean anything. And therefore, it will devalue the properties, the remaining properties that are unbuilt. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right.
Sorry, may I ask you?
Yes, you may. What's your name, sir? Please state it for the record.
Sorry, my name is Kieran Storin. I just think it's interesting that we're having a discussion about single. I mean, when somebody says they're a single parent, what does that mean? That there's multiple parents, or single phase when we go to electricity? Is that multiple phases? Single is single. A single family is one family. Multifamily is multiple families. So I don't know why we're having such a hard time with this. As I think it was Missy said, all over the United States, single family means a single family. And I don't think why, I think this was done back in 2014. I don't see why we would have a different definition of single on a Hilton hand. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
One more in the back.
Lady in the back.
Sally Ayotte, I'm at 85 Follyfield Road. So what I think I've heard today is that the property known as 15 Wimbledon will have lockouts. So I hope that that means, we've talked about the traffic study that needs to happen in July, that will include the density that having these lockouts mean, and also an impact on Islanders Beach and what that will do to the island residents, since this is directly across from their beach.
Thank you. Any other comments? Sir? State your name for the record.
Carl Braden.
Oh, yes.
Chaplain
We
resident.
were looking for you earlier, okay.
Yes, sir, thank you. So I've had some RD lots for 25 years, really, and I've been making plans for them, and this just seems like one more right that is trying to be discluded and increasing our buffers and so on. There's a lot of unknowns that can't be answered, and one thing I wanted to say about lockouts is it seems to me that they're getting a bad rep because we need workforce housing, we need more affordable units. And here they have locked out bedrooms so they can make more, or people can afford to live here. Excluding that will send more people off the island, so that's another thing to consider. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We did get your comments on the portal. We've read those.
I appreciate your reading.
Thank you. Members of the commission, any other comments before we go to a vote?
Well, the way it seems is that we made the mistake when we defined single family is no more than 2. That was the mistake, and now that we want to correct what single family means, it seems like we can't, even though it's logical that single family means 1 unit. It seems like if we make that change now, we impact rights that owners have expected, have anticipated. So it makes it very difficult to logically change for a logical definition because of its potential impacts.
Thank you. Any other comments before we vote?
Just, I do have a suggestion for consideration, and we're trying to wrap a few different related items here into one package, and we're having some issues, I think.
Yes.
And if we were to subdivide the definition of multifamily and single family and separate that from the issue of eliminating the allowance of divisible dwelling units, we might have an easier time with this. So I would suggest that we separate those as 2 separate items, and I think, in my opinion, we need more definition on the elimination of the dwelling units. And the other issue of multifamily versus single-family definitions is more straightforward, and I can see that being changed.
Mr. Campbell, any additional comments?
No additional comments.
Mr. Siebel? I would at this point entertain a motion as to these amendments on chapters 4 and 10 of the Land Management Ordinance. Is there such a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not, I would make the motion that we send this back for more analysis for the questions that have not been answered in my mind at this stage of the game, and not get hung up on definitions of single family, but let's get hung up on impact on communities like the Gullah community, like some of the existing folks that have these lockouts, and knowing what we're talking about here. Are we talking about 15 places, or are we talking about 200 places? Myself, I'm just not comfortable and would make the motion that we send it back for more information.
Is there a second to that motion? Mr. Hens and Mr. Campbell, second. All right. This requires a roll call vote, does it not, Karen?
Yes, sir.
Any other staff comments, Missy?
Sure. Can I ask for a list of the things that you would like for us to address? So the impact to communities.
From my perspective, but I'm
Yes.
sure others have questions.
What is the additional information that you're looking for?
Okay, mine is the rough number of folks that are impacted by this change, both from the standpoint of setbacks and the rest, and how many existing, let's just use mother-in-law, I'm not sure I like the term, 'cause, you know, but the idea that the lockouts, how many are we talking about and who are we impacting?
Okay.
That's
Also, how this, the district plans were raised by the public, how that fits into this decision-making at this time. Are there any other comments that we want staff to check into before we bring this one back? Okay.
You might want to call for a discussion on the motion, too.
Okay, is there a discussion on the motion to send this back to staff? It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? If not, we'll call the roll.
Certainly. Mr. D'Arienzo?
Resubmit, please. Nay.
No, an aye would say that it's going back to staff. So all in favor would say aye, it goes back to staff. If you say no, then we move it up to town council.
Yes.
Mr. Sebald?
Yes.
Mr. Hens?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill?
Yes.
And Mr. Scanlon?
Yes, it should go back.
Thank you.
Chairman Scanlon, can you please close the public hearing?
Yes, I would now at this time close the public hearing, seeing no other hands in the air. And thank you for those who commented. We appreciate it when you step up and tell us how you feel about things that are moving through this commission. We have another piece of business here, and that is the proposed amendments to the Planning Commission Rules of Procedure. As you know, we are no longer going to be having all the various subcommittees. We will act as a committee on the whole, or if needed, ask town council for permission to set up an ad hoc committee. Missy, would you kind of walk us through that?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Scanlon. As mentioned, yes, the rules amendment covers the elimination of the standing committee. It also includes removal of a specific meeting time and day from the rules and would require the adoption of a meeting calendar. Also, there are some additional standards proposed for public hearing requirements for applicants, submission of additional materials, presentations for appeals, votes on appeals. And so those changes were noted in the strikeout and double underline in the proposed amendment to the rules. And also, Mac DeFord, our general counsel, is on the line and has 2 additional changes he would like to go over with you. One is related to how the rules are amended. And right now it refers to the Rules and Procedures Committee. That was an omission on our end that we would like to correct today. That's in Article 3, Section 2, which is on page 2.
Yes, if we could turn, if you have your things, it's Article 3. I think it's on page 2 of the
You're
one
right.
that I have that was
That's
sent to me.
correct. So the proposed language that we would like to propose is that Section 2 amendment would simply state the rules of procedure may be amended at any regular meeting of the Planning Commission, period, and then the rest would be omitted. And then secondly, as it relates to committees as well, on page 5, Section 5, we had struck all of the committee language from the proposed rules, but failed to strike the paragraph that precedes it, and we're proposing that that also be struck today as well.
Section 5, committee.
With permission, yeah, with permission of town council. That's
Take that
correct.
all out.
Mac, did you have anything to add to that?
No, that covers it. And just for clarification, that section 5 language is essentially replaced with that A ad hoc committee, where it says from time to time, town council may establish an ad hoc committee with its membership in charge and determined by town council. So planning commission can still form subcommittees depending on the need for them. And then the only other thing I'll add is under the First Amendment we were discussing, it would read, these rules of procedure may be amended at any regular meeting of the Planning Commission by a majority vote of the Planning Commission.
All right. Is there anything else, Missy, that you want to tell us?
No, that's the summary of
All
the
right.
rules amendment. This was sent out
Yes, I know.
over a month ago.
All right, I would entertain a motion at this point on, yes, any public comments? Yes, sir, I'm sorry, Chester.
Thank you again, Chester Williams. I do have several comments about these proposed amendments. Number one, the new change that Mr. DeFord has recommended in Article 3, Section 2. The public ought to have an opportunity to review proposed changes to your amendments rather than showing up at a meeting and finding out that there are proposed amendments on the agenda. Likewise, y'all ought to have the opportunity to review it. So, that last sentence there says any amendment must be by a majority vote of the commission held at a meeting of the commission at least 7 calendar days after a written draft of the amendment is delivered to all of its members. I think you need to keep that, but expand it to say, and made available to the general public. Now, I admit that I'm one of the very few who's probably really interested in these sorts of things, but that's a very important issue. I can't tell you, I used to serve on the County Zoning Board of Appeals, and I can't tell you the number of times that people would appear before us and not be familiar with the rules. And it just drove me up a wall. And that's one thing that I always try to make sure I understand is what the rules are. But if the rules are going to change on a dime, that makes things very, very difficult, not only for folks like me, but for y'all also. So there ought to be some period of time when proposed amendments are available for review and digestion by the general public as a whole. The committees, who's going to do the work that the Comprehensive Plan Committee has done so far? Who's going to do the work that the LMO Committee has done so far? Who's going to do the work that the CIP Committee has done so far? I don't understand what's broken about your current committee system that needs to be fixed by throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Somebody has to review somebody ought to be reviewing those things and vetting those things before they get to the full Planning Commission for review. And this will leave you with no procedure whatsoever as to how to go about doing that. The other change, public comment during appeals. Do any of y'all ever recall hearing an appeal? I don't think the Planning Commission has ever heard an appeal since 1987. I've filed several of them to the Planning Commission, but I can't get any further than the town staff. They say, oh, you can't appeal that. And which is a whole another separate set of issues, because you're the one who determines whether or not you have jurisdiction to hear a particular appeal, and the town staff has been usurping that. But there should be no public comment whatsoever in an appeal. When you sit and in fact, the only appeal jurisdiction you have right now is when somebody appeals a decision of the town staff on a development permit application or a subdivision application. If you go back and Mr. Hens, I still owe you a copy of the State Enabling Act. I'll send that to you. If you go back and read the State Enabling Act, the default position is that the Planning Commission reviews and acts on all subdivision applications and all development plan applications. But the State Enabling Act also allows for the delegation of that authority to staff. And that's where we are right now. If you go back and take a look at the 1987 original LMO, at that point, the Planning Commission had retained jurisdiction to review and act on subdivisions of 50 or more lots. At some point along the way, even that was delegated to the staff. So the only appeals that y'all are ever going to hear at this point are appeals from staff decisions on those applications. And if there ever does come a time when you sit to hear an appeal, you're sitting then in a quasi-judicial capacity. When you're looking at LMO amendments, you're sitting in a legislative capacity. But when you're sitting in a quasi-judicial capacity, you're acting as the judge. And there's certain due process requirements that go along with those sorts of hearings. And allowing public comment on an appeal hearing would be like in the setting in a courthouse where you have a plaintiff and the defendant who both put on their case, and then the judge says, okay, all y'all out there in the peanut gallery, what do y'all have to say about this? Let's put all that on the record also. That's wholly and completely inappropriate. And there should be absolutely no public comment on an appeal. Cross-examination should be allowed. I mean, if I have an appeal and the town puts up a witness, well then I want the opportunity to cross-examine that witness. And this excludes the right of cross-examination. I think that's a violation of basic due process requirements. So I think these changes need a lot more consideration before you go forward with them also. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. I do attend, not all, but most development team review team meetings, so that a member of the Planning Commission is there when we're first interviewing a proposal to the town. And so I've been to several of those meetings as chair. I've been going to them when I can. I don't know, in terms of these revised, there is no clock ticking on these that I am aware of. And if staff differs with me, let me know, please speak up. But it's my understanding that we should probably go back and take another look at these as well in terms of the notification and public notification of the fact that we are eliminating these subcommittees and acting as a committee of the whole on any of these matters whenever we need to take up something, or to set up an ad hoc committee if we need to with the permission of town council. Any comments by the commissioners?
Yeah, I guess, first of all, this is the first time we've heard some of this. This has been treated a couple of times before. And isn't the fundamental question for us here is, you know, the enabling legislation says that we have these responsibilities. And what we have done, in effect, is to delegate most of those responsibilities to staff, correct?
Yes.
And so that when work comes to the Planning Commission, it's completed staff work that we're to opine on, analyze, and the rest of it. So it comes down to, are we trying to get more efficient with the Planning Commission, which would mean, yes, you consolidate these committees and you let staff do the rest of it.
Streamline the process.
Right. Or are we trying to do what you said, which is make a knowledge base that's much bigger than we have now, because we're depending on staff to do that. So those are the choices, and I'm not sure, you know, where you go with it. You know, we all like the idea of streamlining and making it more efficient. On the other hand, from what I've heard, we don't necessarily like the rubber stamp nature of what we do, because we're depending on very good, by the way, very good staff, the best I can imagine. So this has nothing to do with that judgment. It's really more, which way do we want to go as a commission?
Are there any other public comments on this particular issue before we decide what we want to do? I would entertain a motion on what we do with our committee, these amendments to our
Hey, Mike,
operations.
just wanted to comment with respect, Mr. Williams, where'd you go? With respect to the appeals process, I think that's a very good point, because, for instance, 15 Folly Field development, that continues to resurface in various forms every time we meet, it seems, and it's probably not the last time we'll hear about that development. So if there was a more defined process as to how an appeal is made and how it's pursued, it'd be in our best interests.
With respect to that particular project, Mr. DRA, there hasn't been any formal appeal to you yet because the town staff still.
Yes.
Another hearsay. The code says that the town is supposed to act on an application within 60 days. Now, I read that as saying, approve it or deny it. Right. The town reads that as saying, well, if we give you some comments and ask you to change some things, then we've acted, which means that they can continue to do that ad infinitum. You know, every 60 days, give you a letter. So here, change this, change that, and just drag things out, because that application was filed over a year ago, and it has still not been approved or denied by the town. There's one particular issue we're going round and round about that the town wants us to change. We have a particular system that meets all the requirements of the code, and the town says, we want you to change it. And the last response back was, no, we're not going to change it. You either approve it as is or you deny it. So that may come up to y'all. I don't know. But if it does come up to y'all, then it should be what's referred to as a record appeal. You get all the materials, you look at it, you decide whether or not the town staff has done the right thing there. It's not the type of thing where the general public gets to, everybody puts their 2 cents worth in on there. Okay. And also the provision in here, proposed provision that the Planning Commission can defer action on an appeal. The state code says that you have to act on an appeal within 60 days. And if you defer it and it goes beyond 60 days, then you violated the state statutes. Thank you.
Thank you. The chair would entertain a motion on what we do with these particular changes to the rules and procedures. Do we have such a motion? Mr. O'Neill?
I think I'll make it just for the sake of entertaining any more discussion that you might want to have, Mr. Chairman, because, well, let me read the motion. I move to amend the proposed rules of procedure amendments by revising Article 3, Section 2, which pertains to the amendments to state, quote, these rules of procedure may be amended at any regular meeting of the Planning Commission by a majority vote, and deleting the first paragraph under Article 4, Section 5, which pertains to committees on the grounds that the deleted provisions will no longer serve any purpose due to the dissolution, of the standing committee. So what I'm trying to say there is a phrase in here that says we can change these rules at any time by majority vote of the Planning Commission. And to Chet's very good points, we either vote this motion down and go back to work, or we vote for it and understand that, going forward, we can make changes as we need to make changes.
All right. Is there a second for that motion by Mr. O'Neill? There is a second from Mr. D'Arienzo. Any comment on the motion before we vote on it?
Did you cover two things in that paragraph or one? Did you cover 2 points of this or one point?
I think 1 point, which is the bit about being able to change the rules at any point in the future by majority vote of the Planning Commission. That was my interpretation.
That's Article 3, Section 2.
Yes.
And what's your proposal? So here's what staff recommended. What's your change?
There is no change to what staff recommended.
Any other questions?
I thought that staff changed that at this meeting.
What we did,
I had it crossed out.
well, is Mark still on the line? That's Matt, excuse me. Max, you still on the line?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Could you give us a quick walkthrough of Mr. O'Neill's motion in layman's terms? What?
Yes, sir.
Well, yes or no, tell us what we're doing.
Yes, sir. So can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, with regard to Article 3, Section 2, what you would be doing is amending that paragraph to read, these rules of procedure may be amended at any regular meeting of the Planning Commission with a majority vote. Of course, any proposed amendments would need to be noticed in accordance with the South Carolina Freedom of Information Act, as they have been today. And then it's striking out any of the other language there with a written draft at least 7 calendar days beforehand, because we are bringing that into alignment with state law under FOIA. And then with regards to the other amendment, let me scroll down. That is under section 5. That is being stricken because with permission of town council,
hold
the
it for a
commission
second.
and the.
Hold it for a second. We have question.
I'm a simple man. Let's just focus on back.
Go ahead.
What we just talked about.
So what do you have a comment or a question?
Yeah, I think I'd like to comment on this before we move on. I'd like to,
Now's a good time.
you want to repeat your motion on Article 3, Section 2?
Yes, that's it. I mean, that second part is not part of the motion. Okay, you want me to repeat it? Okay. Move to amend the proposed rules of procedure amendments by revising Article 3, Section 2, which pertains to amendments to state, these rules of procedure may be amended at any regular meeting of the Planning Commission by a majority vote, and deleting the first paragraph under Article 4, Section 5, which pertains to committees, on the grounds that the deleted provisions will no longer serve any purpose due to the dissolution. The red light.
I can hear fine.
The red light usually means stop, but up here it means go. So, you want me to try this again?
Did you, Mr. Hens, you had asked a question. Do you
You
understand?
moved on to Article 4.
Right.
For a loop. Is that required? Or can you pause after your amendment to Article 3 and then move on to Article 4 next?
So in other words, treat it as two separate motions. Okay, yeah, fine with me.
I think for discussion purposes, you're saying.
Right. Chester, do you have a comment?
I do. As Mrs. DeFord just mentioned, if you do adopt this, any changes have to be noticed under the Freedom of Information Act. Well, this particular change wasn't noticed under the Freedom of Information Act for this meeting, nor, to my knowledge, was it included in a written draft provided to y'all at least 7 days in advance. So adopting that amendment right now violates your current rules. So I would submit to you that you can't adopt that right now.
Okay. Thank you, Chester.
Mr. Chairman, I withdraw the motion.
All right, the motion is withdrawn. That being the case, again, we need to get this back to staff for the next meeting and make sure we have given the appropriate public notice so that people know we're changing the rules, eliminating the committees if this is adopted, and making sure that we have a clear notion of two separate things, okay? One is the first thing, and the second article, the two different motions instead of one, trying to understand one motion. I would move that we take this and send it back to staff again for appropriate public notices, and also to, if there are any appeals, make sure that that's delineated in there, what can and cannot be done with regards to public hearing, no public hearing, that sort of thing. I'd like to see that in black and white for the commission. Is there a second to my motion of sending this back to staff? Mr. Hens seconds, and also Mr. Campbell. All in favor of sending it back for clarification? It is a unanimous vote. All right. Next order of business is the proposed meeting schedule. It's been sent to you.
Mr. Chair,
yes.
because we did not amend the rules of procedure, we cannot adopt the next agenda item.
We can't, we don't need to do that now?
Scheduling.
Nope, we cannot, because the rules state
Okay.
our meeting date and time.
All right, fair enough. Then we'll do that at the next meeting as well. Wow. The guy's running the next meeting, he's going to have his hands full. All right. Under commission business, we need to set up a nominating committee, and that your current chairman is resigning. And so therefore, I would ask for volunteers of Mr. Campbell, Mr. O'Neill, and Mr. Siebold, if you would serve as a three-man nominating committee for replacing, we get to elect our own officers, vice chairman and chairman. So I would ask that you three serve as a nominating committee, and get together and figure out what you want to do for future leadership. Under Chairman's report, this being my last meeting, as I've indicated previously, I will be leaving. I've sent my letter of resignation to Mayor Perry, and I've decided after 5 years on the commission, 2.5 of those as chair, that I will be resigning for both personal and professional reasons. My wife Paula is in the audience, and the polka dots over here. I want to thank Paula for putting up with me in all these meetings and being away. I learned, I think it was Clint Eastwood who said a man has to know his limitations, and I've gotten to that point where I know my limitations and what I can and can't be doing in terms of time and effort. I want to express thanks to many people, but including my two predecessors as chairman, both Alex Brown and Peter Christian, for helping me learn the ropes along the way. I hold the current and past members of this commission in very high regard, knowing about the time and the effort that they put into this form of community service. I want to thank my vice chairs, Alan Perry and the current Mark O'Neill, for their assistance along the way. To Rick D'Arienzo, Bruce Siebold, Tom Hens, John Campbell, Mark O'Neill, I wish you smooth sailing and non-controversial meetings in the future. And last but not least, I want to say how much I've enjoyed and appreciated the work of the town hall staff for making sure we prepare for each and every meeting. Now, we obviously today we had a few glitches, but that's the way it works sometimes in government. So to Karen Knox and Teresa Haley, who preceded her, I want to thank you for your work over the years. And to Missy and Jennifer, Mac, Brian, two Brians, Shay, Trey, and Ashley, thank you for your diligent work and commitment to the town of Hilton Head Island. I want to thank the citizens of this town and the people that we try to serve. And I want to especially thank a fellow named Chester, who has kept me on the straight and narrow for 5 years now. I want to thank you. He's the most valuable attendee at meetings. Thank you. I will leave you with one thought. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Thank you all. There are no staff reports.
If I may be so presumptuous as to speak.
I don't know if I recognize
for the You're right. for the whole town. Thank you very much for your service. People like you, the quality of y'all up there who are willing to serve in these sorts of positions, not only is a great benefit to the town, but to be selfish about it makes my job so much easier. And for that, I thank you very much. I wish you good luck. And if there's anything we can do, please let us know. Thanks.
Thank you, Chester. Very kind. I appreciate that. There being no other business, or is there some more business? Oh, we do have a staff report.
I just wanted to thank you for your service to the community, and I appreciate and thank you for thanking us, but we really appreciate your dedication as chair and as a long-term planning commission member. We truly appreciate it. Brian Eber also had a quick staff report as a follow-up from the last meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you also for what you've done for our community. I do appreciate that. A quick status report on the current project that South Island PSD is doing down Dunnigan's Alley.
That's right.
And if I might provide just a big picture scale for it, the project came in that was going to be a phased project. And the first phase of that project came in, I want to say about October of last year. And shortly after that, we met with the adjacent property owners in the motor coach facility.
Right.
We've sat down with them on 3 different separate occasions, town staff has. Once with South Island PSD, the other 2 without South Island PSD, to go listen to, understand what their concerns that they have about the construction activities that have happened. Phase 1 is the installation of a new half a million gallon tank, elevated, and the construction of a new entrance, and the installation of 1 shallow well and 1 very deep well. Currently, that's the work and activity that's limited to what they've been approved to do at this time. That work will involve the drilling of a deep well, which does make a significant amount of noise if not properly adhered to town standards. The town has in its municipal code both a frequency and an elevation, describe the decimals, the noise levels at different frequency requirements for both during the day and at night. At this time, the town staff has not been satisfied with the approach from South Island PSD to put forward to Mr. Mark Orlando the signature of the approval of this work to happen. We feel that South Island PSD most recently last week submitted new information on new ways they're going to dampen the sound from the drilling operations. They're going to manage the water from the drilling operations and how they're going to do that both day and night, because this has to be a continuous drilling operation. They're estimated about 2.5 months to drill in these deep aquifers that we need, because our shallow aquifers are contaminated with salt water. So that's why they have to go to the depths they do. We feel that the proposal they submitted last week and the commitment that they have continued to make to town staff, that they will adhere to all concerns and address them as best they can. The motor coach decided to pursue a legal action against South Island PSD. That's why some of the communication and the back and forth and the understanding of where they're at is very challenging currently. We hope to garner more. We're going to meet with them yet again to try to lay out this next phase that they're looking to do as they finish up phase 1. Phase 2 will have to come back before this committee to seek approval. You guys will, as we go through our code amendments, we'll be updating that process for you all. But they're about a year or year and a half away from submitting to the town for the work that's involved in phase 2, which the town has shared with the motor coach that we have some very similar concerns, and we want to make sure that they're.
I wanted to ask you, do you feel that they're going to try to take to heart what the comments from the people at the RV park are, or are they perhaps, trying to shuffle this aside?
As the director, I can't speak for Papu, but I believe he is absolutely committed to taking to heart the sentiments and concerns that they have.
Public hearing here.
Yep.
Thank you. Any questions?
After it's finished, so you bite the bullet for 2.5 months and it's done, noise, this and that. After 2.5 months when it's done, is there any noise for the next 50 years?
It's a great question. There are operational noises and systems that need to be put into place. Some of those came from suggestions from the motor coach in themselves, but the town is absolutely looking to, and the PSD is committed verbally to ensuring that long-term that they do recognize avenues and pursue methods during construction to mitigate that noise being transferred off-site towards them.
Any other questions? Thank you. Appreciate it very kindly.
Thank you.
It's very important that we respond to all those comments that were at our public hearing on that topic. Thank you, sir. There being no other business before the commission, we stand adjourned. Thank you. I'm going to light up my red arc.